I come to you from a Waitakere-based organisation called SustainaWorks. It's a social enterprise and training organisation that's associated with Shakti. Shakti being a national service provider for migrant women affected by domestic violence. And my role is funded by Foundation North, and it's very wide-ranging between training Shakti clients in sewing and retail skills, and then also going out educating the wider community about sustainability and textile waste, campaigning online, and delivering workshops and seminars like this. And what a particularly cool time to carry on this conversation. You guys all would have seen in the news this week. And for anyone who didn't see, and for recording's sake, there was a segment on Sunday discussing fast fashion, how much of a beast companies like Shein are, and how much our local landfills are being filled with clothes and textiles. Also taking a fairly nuanced look at why we consume fast fashion, its cost accessibility for people. And this was awesome to see, because we really need to understand all sides of the issue to have a grown-up conversation about it and think about pragmatic ways to deal with it. And then it also looked at the complex topic of recycling, how fast fashion is so difficult to recycle because of its material components. So some of that I'll expand on a little down the track. And then what we looked at last week was a brief history of New Zealand's local fashion industry and how it went global because of the competitively low pricing offered by countries that are affected by colonization, how the oppressive impacts of colonization has continued up until today by keeping developing countries' labour forces, which in this case in particular brown women in the garment trade, keeping them underfunded Western fashion corporations, and then the physical and mental harm that is done to these women because of this, and then the wide range of pollutants that the fashion industry creates that damage our ecosystems and our climate. And then where we ended is that on a personal level, the global supply chain of things disconnects us from what we consume. We have no idea where they came from or why they cost so little to buy. And our rapid trend cycles means these things are uncool, basically, right after we bought them, which is good because they were so poorly made to begin with that they weren't going to last too long anyway. So we're restrained to make the emancipatory decisions about our consumption that we want to make because of lack of awareness and lack of accountability. And we're convinced by sort of mainstream messaging that this is the best option or the only option. And my hope is that by having these conversations with the increasing prevalence of these topics in mainstream media, is that we can introduce different and sometimes old-fashioned ways of thinking about our clothes, and this mindset can reach out past our clothes into all of the things that we consume, because they are the same, really. It's a mindset about keeping our consumption and our disposal, more importantly, close to home, where we can see it and where we can understand it, its true impacts. And we can even use our clothes to be a vessel of connection to the people and the communities around us. It's an old-fashioned approach because localized production of our clothes was commonplace before technological advancements allowed us to trade and communicate on an international scale. And with this innovation, it's come, awesome, really, really good things. And then also some of the problems we've discussed. Pollution and the climate crisis is exacerbated by all industries and worsens each year with our increased consumption and particularly increased shipping needs. In the fashion supply chain in particular, the fabric may be purchased in China, shipped to India to be cut and sewn, and then shipped to 3 different countries to sell in the retail stores, and then you buy it online and then it gets sent to your country. And so you can imagine the climate impact of that one hypothetical garment is massive. And that's not even factoring in the emissions from its actual production. So it's not hard to imagine how reduced a garment's climate impact would be if it was made locally. I used to work in a production team. I really loved it. It was actually awesome. We had between 40 and 60% production in Auckland, and the rest was offshore. And to have any based locally is rare for a New Zealand brand. Something that I mentioned last week or last session is that we used to have a workforce at max of about 80,000 people in manufacturing, and now it's about 2,200. Well, that was a few years ago, so it's probably less now. Yeah, so part of my job was ferrying around parts of the local supply chain in a van. So I'd like leave, it was in Greyland, I'd leave the office at 1 o'clock, and then I'd go like around the corner to Morningside and pick up some covered buttons, and then like just next door was Wool Fabrics, and I'd pick up some fabric, and then I'd hop down to Glen Eden on the motorway and drop it off and pick up the cart and take it around the corner to James at Long Don's, and then I'd go to Avondale, and that was where the presser was, and then I'd like take like 100 garments back in the van with me to Brayden, and then I'd be there at 4 o'clock, and so it's all there, it's all close. Yeah, I enjoyed it so much, and also I got to like meet all of those people that were carrying the local industry, which was just amazing. Every single one of those steps requires its whole own business.
Right.
So the climate impact of those, to do each of those things, it's not nothing, but it is nothing in comparison to what you could imagine that it would look like if it was taken all around the world.
Yeah.
So the idea of localizing our industries, including in particularly fashion, is getting increasingly essential. Climate change might force us to make this transition before we would like to admit that we even have a problem in the first place. Over COVID-19, we learned in vivid colour the impact that uncontrollable global factors can have on our ability to access the things that we need and consume. Essential things like food, but then also frivolous things like fashion. But that still has, you know, businesses and wages associated with it that are on the line, who know, if they get impacted. With this brand that I was working with, if there was a lockdown in China, where we had, you know, half of our production, a shipment might get to us like an entire month late, and that would be 5 styles and 600 garments. So, you know, the impact is real. So another increasingly disruptive factor is climate change. Now that we've invested so heavily in the global supply chain perpetuates climate change is preventing us from being able to reliably utilize these supply chains. The system we created that threatened our ecosystems is now threatened by our ecosystems. For example, the flooding that Pakistan had last year. Pakistan is one of the major producers of cotton globally. So yeah, all supply of cotton for the fashion industry was really reduced, and the prices went soaring. So this devastated Pakistan and their global trade capacity, but it also impacted the entire fashion industry. Another example from this Yale article, how climate change is impacting our global supply chain. Heavy rainfall and snowmelt last February caused some banks of the Rhine River, Europe's most important commercial waterway, to begin to burst, triggering a halt in river shipping for several days. Then in April, water levels on the Rhine, which was facing a long-term drought, dropped so low that cargo ships were forced to load no more than half their usual capacity to avoid running aground. In recent years, manufacturers relying on the Rhine have increasingly faced shipping capacity reductions that disrupted both inbound raw material and outbound product delivery flows as a result of the drought. So these major weather events are going to become more frequent and more disruptive every time, and our local and international economy will have to find a way to adjust to this, to ensure their prosperity and, you know, our prosperity, hopefully, because obviously we're all impacted by climate change. And I don't know if I mentioned last time, but yeah, fashion industry is responsible for 10% of all climate emissions. Pretty impressive. So something to ponder when we think about the ideal future of the fashion industry is what ideas we can pull from the past. Once again, it's simplistic way to view things and not so easy to achieve, but we've got the benefit of past knowledge to learn from. New innovation is awesome, and it's got its place, and it's going to continue to happen, but it's being used as a scapegoat to put off making essential changes to the way that we do things. in favor of just like waiting for this hypothetical miracle solution, because waiting is a gamble and harm is done every day while we wait. So, but as well as this, we have much to gain from localizing our industries. This is a widely accepted idea amongst sustainable fashion advocates and academics. My favorite one ever, Kate Fletcher, is the most cited author on the topic of sustainable fashion and an avid promoter of a return to localism. So these quotes are from a paper, The Fashion Land Ethic, Localism, Clothing Activity, and Macclesfield, and doing exploration of the current state of like a local fashion ecosystem. And it favors the idea that even our modern technological systems should be considered ecosystems in their own right, because in this way we can better understand just how unhealthy they are. Ecosystems vary depending on where they are. For locally varied ecosystems to flourish and for their wealth, their natural capital to be conserved, the activities within them, knowledge, communities, products, cultures, and practices, require adaptation to their specific place. This process is localism. It involves the shaping of activity by a region's natural factors and by what is intriguing and dynamic in a place to ensure its long-term prosperity. It favors the use of nearby resources, place-specific knowledge, community reliance, practices shaped by traditions, necessity, climate, and imagination. The practice of connecting a community with the place that supports it introduces a feedback loop that is location-specific and which binds together a community's actions and their effects and responsibility for them. In an MB feedback loop, so in my backyard, a community's values steer its activities, including the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. So this is obviously in stark contrast to what we have at the moment, in which we pay absolutely no consequences for the way that we choose our clothes to be made. If we were thinking about, making a textile here in Auckland and we wanted to dye it, we might think twice about the way that we did it, because it would not be some offshore river that is dealing with the wastewater. It would be our water. So this steer reflects preferences for employment in a place, the tools available, childcare on offer, the speed of the internet connection, the recycling facilities. It prefers nearby resources because that is what is available, a constraint that also reduces transport-related emissions. Yet beyond emissions reduction, local values drive products and services to be better considered, but the consequences of not doing so will be felt directly at home. It tends towards creating goods that are appropriately durable as determined by those who use and repair the products in the place where they live. It reflects the skills, stories, the motifs, and visual language of the place. The steer regulates the scale of economic activity, because the associated costs of each extra unit of production or service delivered will be borne locally, and the trade-off between cost and benefit negotiated. And so then it goes on to study the local fashion culture of this UK town called Macclesfield, what local and unique exchanges are apparent and what non-economic features are special about this culture and could potentially be built upon to strengthen a local fashion ecosystem. And throughout her work, Fletcher uses the metaphor of plants and ecosystems to describe the fashion industry, considering large-scale production and flashy trends and marketing as like above-ground visible growth, like in agriculture, with shallow roots and very little resilience when a storm comes. And then healthy, resilient local fashion ecosystems are made up of appropriate species for the area, and they have deep roots and they face the storm much better. Local stewardship and a sense of responsibility is found in the root system that governs how clothes-related skills, aptitudes, ideas, and resources of a place, the fashion culture, reflect a place's distinctiveness. In Macclesfield, this local adaptation was found in small exchanges, in a community's affection for and commitment to a particular haberdasher, in a laundrette owner providing basic social care to surrounding residents, as well as clothes maintenance, in a thriving word-of-mouth network of small businesses. Such experiences are not open to commodification or control. They are part of an other infrastructure or web of relationships that support fashion practices to dress with the whole place. So I love that paper. It's really tender. And it's a new approach to looking at local fashion interactions with economic factors removed. So if we can start to think of our local fashion resource cycles like an ecosystem in nature, then it'll be more resilient to change, meet our personal needs better, and also feed sort of neighboring species, which we can think of as like parallel industries, community groups, and neighborhoods. And that's what we need from the industry right now. And an ecosystem is necessarily circular with all of its resources being used infinitely. So this is an apt metaphor because it describes the modern concept of the circular economy. So I'll briefly touch on the principles of circular economy so I can reference this as we can talk about existing or upcoming or potential solutions for reducing waste or climate impact at an industry and at a personal level. From the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the circular economy is based on 3 principles driven by design: eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials, and regenerate nature. The products we use for all aspects of life are often designed and manufactured with little thought for the resources consumed in making them or what happens to them at the end of their life. Apart from the most expensive purchases we make, like a car or a house, when something breaks in our modern world, it is often more expensive to repair than to buy a new one, and usually it goes to the landfill. Simply put, these products are not designed for reuse, repair, refurbishment, or to be remanufactured. This take, make, dispose mindset has created a linear economy. A circular economy is an alternative to the traditional linear economy, in which we keep resources in use for as long as possible, extract the maximum value from them whilst in use, and recover and regenerate products and materials at the end of each service life. So the garment life cycle at the moment is take resources, make clothes, use them, and then throw them away, completely linear. So consider how things could be adjusted to better meet these circular principles. We'll start with designing out waste. This is quite hard to do with clothes today because of the expectations that we have of our clothes. We want them to fit close to our body. We want them to be easy and fast to put on. And we want them to meet constantly changing expectations of style and form. And just cutting these like funny human shapes out of a piece of rectangle fabric, that's just rubbish on the floor. Between 15 and 40% of all fabric immediately on the cutting room floor. Was not always the case. Much Indigenous cultural dress is zero waste. Sari, the sarong, kilts, all zero waste. They're also one size fits all, which is very cool. The kimono is usually a zero waste garment. They just like put some cuts in it to help it form the body. Not so much of a thing today. There are a few modern designers making zero waste clothing. Its commercial success is limited because of competition and Western standards. It costs more to make, even if it uses less fabric, because the pattern development stage is really time intensive. But there are options out there that are becoming more prominent because there's increased access to the ability to market what you do. They're easy to make small clothing brands. But it gives you an opportunity to think, could I consider wearing clothes that fit a little differently, that are a bit outside of trends and, accepted norms, if I knew that it was zero waste. A more accessible and common form of zero waste production is knitwear. So standard issue is Auckland-based. They have an Auckland factory, super awesome. They make fully fashion knit clothing, which means that all of its parts are completely made on the knitting machine to its final shape. Nothing on the cutting floor. So that's something that you can consider as supporting or promoting brands like that. Another way to eliminate waste at the design stage is to remove trims or make trims more durable or reusable. When clothing is thrown away, a really common reason is a broken trim, like the zips come apart or the elastic is stretched out. Trims in fast fashion are usually low quality, and they're not easy to fix at home for the most part, meaning it would cost more like I mentioned before, to fix the garment than it costs to buy in the first place. It's just not realistic. So alternatives, wearing clothes that have ties and drawstrings that are made out of the same fabric, or buttons and toggles that are made out of wood. Koto is a great example of a brand that's taking a thoughtful approach to trims. They design things like pants with a button fly rather than a zip fly because buttons are easy to replace. Another way to design out waste is by designing in longevity, so hard-wearing, high-quality fabrics which can withstand long use, and durable construction which is done with care. This will lead to a more expensive garment, but the cost is outweighed by the long life of durable clothes that also work for your life. So those are some ideas on designing out waste, and then next is circulating products and materials that we've already used. To start coming back to op shops, we talked about it in the last session. Op shops are awesome and could be better utilised as a structure for a whole range of industries. We can see this starting to come to life with the growing number of resource recovery centres popping up, especially in Auckland because of council funding. I think there's almost 15 at this point. The purpose of these is to intercept items that would go to landfill, try to introduce repair schemes for anything that's been broken, and then obviously bring the good, useful item back to the market. The structure is awesome. You should support them where you can. And it also has a lot of potential to consider. We can imagine specialized secondhand stores for different items, one specifically for clothes, another for home decor, another for outdoor and sports equipment, so on. It would make op shops more user-friendly because it's more likely that you find the item that they're looking for. But for this to happen, the products of the op shops might be more expensive because there's extra labor taken to sort and repair. And this is a hard sell because people have been really combative to the idea of higher prices at op shops, and I understand why. I mentioned last session, we've understood op shops as a market for low-income families, and I think that these options are important and should remain. However, for us to transition to a circular economy, we're going to need to make secondhand retailers both more useful and less stigmatized. We need to make secondhand trading a viable business, not just a task that's shouldered by volunteers, which is what it is at the moment. We need to mainstream the idea of secondhand as the first option. Secondhand is not inherently worse, it's not inherently less valuable, but we insist on putting low prices on these items even when they're barely used. But this is starting to change with the popularization of higher end secondhand options like boutique stores and thrift resellers. It's been a contentious topic. They've faced backlash because it's sort of accused that they're like buying out high quality or rare things from op shops and reselling them at a premium. But my hot take is that I think these businesses are awesome because for all of their valid criticism about reducing the availability of these treasure pieces for the average op shopper, what we know already is that there will continue to be many items donated to op shops for people to choose from. Much too much for them to deal with. It could be argued that these traders are reducing the amount of extra stock that needs to be dumped by op shops, which is happening at the moment.
And they spend all that time curating their stock, which is so much time. So that's why they can justify that extra cost.
Yeah.
Right.
They've done the work for you.
Yeah, makes sense.
So when we're considering the future, high-end resellers are an example of a true circular economy business. They increase access of secondhand items to those who might have never considered secondhand, people who would never get the time to hunt for something secondhand or would have easily purchased a similar item new because they hold a stigma. And it's also creating an awesome industry for young women in particular to become small business owners. I think they're serving a really important purpose of making secondhand cool, and I think it's setting our mainstream communication in a good direction towards considering secondhand for all kinds of things, including past clothes. And I've also, they often like raise awareness about fast fashion at the same time, which I think is really cool. So the vision is for a thriving big resale economy. In this future, our items would be ideally long lasting if they've been made well. When we purchase them, we pay a little more for its quality materials and construction. Because we paid a little more, we might be more inclined to make thoughtful purchasing decisions and take care of it personally by developing repair skills or supporting a local repair business. In this world, we're producing less, but that's okay because these jobs are replaced by repair and refurbishment jobs. And then this in itself creates a huge base of skills to be passed around the community. And this is where we're increasing our personal community resilience. So that's looking at optimizing, keeping our products in circulation and then onto end of life, except obviously in the circular economy, there is no end of life. So I'll look at how somebody might address the end of their clothes lives now, and then what's being worked on currently, which will be available at a wide scale in the hopefully not too distant future. One of the main things that we do at Sustainaworks, where I am, is teaching sewing skills utilizing textile waste. So process known as upcycling, which is taking something at the end of its useful life and then pulling it back up the lifeline to something that's useful again. Some workshops I'm doing in the coming weeks is like chopping up bad t-shirts into a yarn and then crocheting that yarn into something new. These kinds of skills are great to have responsibility of the textiles that you use on your own. I think they're a beautiful way for communities to come together, to join in craft and waste minimization, and maybe even like generate a little bit of income. Pragmatically, this process can only be done so many times before materials are not useful again. At that point, we need widely accessible textile recycling. So recycling is a word that people need to understand better. So recycling is the process by which we break an item down into its raw form and then recreate the product back into what it formerly was. So aluminium recycling is taking a tin can and then it's deconstructed and it's turned back into another tin can. This is in contrast to upcycling, which is taking something useless and making it into something better. And then what's downcycling, which people often call recycling, is when you take something that's pretty good and you make it into something that's lower down the lifeline. So those are not the same. It's not the same because recycling requires intensive machinery to break the garment down to a fiber level and recreate the textile. At the moment, it also requires the textiles to be pure, like 100% cotton, 100% polyester, so that the recycling process can effectively boil it down to its fibers. That was something that they mentioned in the Sunday piece. At the moment, a lot of fast fashion is a mix of multiple different fibers like cotton poly, which means that it can't be boiled down well to its base fibers and remake. So this is another situation where circularity needs to be designed in. So clothes are made with the intention of being recyclable. Clothing recycling facilities exist overseas. We've just, we're small here in New Zealand, we've been hindered. But there is a new option becoming available in New Zealand, and this is downcycling factories. So taking, an item that's not fully at the end of its life and then making it into something slightly lower down the life cycle. So in the case of clothing, this tends to look like taking a garment that's not so bad. But we have no infrastructure in New Zealand to fix or systematically improve these clothes back into clothes. So the option that we have right now is mincing them up into like a wadding material. And then that can be used for like decorative cushions, couches, insulation and underlay. A long-running business that we have in New Zealand that does this is called Textile Products. They're based in Onehunga. It's a 60-year-old family business, which I think is really awesome. And then a new option is becoming available. In early 2021, a New Zealand branch was formed of an Australian enterprise called Apparel. They were featured in stuff last week. And then they have a similar production process. So for the moment, Apparel has partnered with Icebreaker to offer drop-off boxes in their stores for anyone to hand in their textiles. Apparel will take them and then make it into these various products. So that's a consumer option that hasn't been available before, and it's cool for a couple of reasons. The first is that obviously it keeps the textiles out of landfill. What we understood from last session was how bad it is for clothes to sit in landfill if they are an organic material like cotton and they decompose and create greenhouse gases, and then if they're synthetic, then they sit and break apart and release chemicals and microplastics and all that fun stuff. So instead, it keeps the textiles in circulation and keeps making it into something that is used and is useful. What it also does is it starts to eliminate the need to keep creating these kinds of products new in the way that we've been doing it thus far. So all of those things, cushion stuffing, underlaying, blah, 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 they're usually made out of plastic, oil at the moment. So we're extracting oil to keep making them. And so this is slowing the process of extracting those raw resources, and replacing them with materials that are bothering us in New Zealand right now. So I think that's going to have really, really cool effects, and keeping money here in New Zealand, creating jobs, utilizing what we have here, and supporting our economy. So that's really cool, and that's starting now, which is really exciting. So that's some current and sort of realistic envisionings of transitioning this current disjointed, polluting industry to something that's more local, responsive, skilled, and ultimately, hopefully, more circular, where our clothes are made here and made well with less waste. If we need to pass them on, there's a healthy resale market, and then also hopefully a thriving repairs market where we are happy to pay for our things to be fixed. And then at the point of uselessness, we've got recycling options that are accessible to everyone to make the thing into a new thing without extracting your resources. So it's about stubbornly refusing to send things to landfill and seeking the local resources, wisdom and skills and services for alternative options. It's good for the economy, it's better for the planet, but it takes buy-in from the average person, and we need to start by supporting these things right now. So I'm going to list off some resources that I know of for how I've personally bettered my clothing ecosystem with what we have on offer now. And then at the end, I'm hoping I might be able to save a bit of time for any other ideas that I've missed, and to start with a grain of salt. There are lots of options out there for how we can go about our clothing in the best way, and this is lucky because many of them won't work for everyone. Everyone's different needs, especially the case for anyone in the margins or in intersections. It can't be understated that one option definitely does not work for all. A predominant reason, as we know, that fast fashion has been so popular is because it's so accessible. Large corporations are more likely to have a bigger size range because they're making 1,000 pieces of a particular style. They probably have a more accessible, more useful online store, which is obviously helpful for anyone who can't shop in person because of access needs. And obviously the low prices are accessible to people on low incomes, which democratizes the ability to wear clothes and have fun. We don't all have the time, capacity, transport, funds, access to take on every habit change that we might like to. And that's fine, because if you can't manage it, if you can't actually sustain this habit change, then it's inherently unsustainable. Ultimately, it's not our individual responsibility to end climate change because we're not responsible for the bulk of it. And you shouldn't be doing these actions out of shame either, because as individuals, we're not the same as Shein. What I've learned over these sort of years is to not do sustainability to beat myself up. I've learned, with some time to do it for the sweet and mundane processes that relax me, and the sweet exchanges that I have with people in my community. Something that I mentioned in the first session. Integrating sustainable life habits into your life can only be sustainable if it's done in a way that brings you some joy. And right now, the way that we consume things that we don't need, and then we have to deal with the rubbish at the end of it, it doesn't bring us real joy, or at least as much joy as we might like to think that it does. Whereas with mindfulness, I've found a huge amount of joy from my stubborn pursuits to keep my clothes from the bin and the random and unpredictable connections that I forge with people as I pass on my clothes for another life. So the first and easiest and most accessible way to lessen your clothing impact is by buying less. Simple, nice. Buy fewer things that you'll use, and when you get them, use them fully. So when you're deciding what you buy, questions to ask yourself is like, where specifically will I wear this? What specifically will I wear it with? Something that I like to do, especially at the op shop where I make my most impulsive decisions, is I try to walk away from the thing, and then I come back in a couple of weeks, and if it's still there, I think about, do I still feel the same about it, or has it lost some of its magic? And then also worth thinking about is what will I do once it starts to break down? Is it something that I think that I can fix, or can be fixed easily, or can it be recycled, or can it be composted? And then if you decide you need something and you won't be able to find it secondhand, considering locally made, it will cost you more money because you're paying for someone to get minimum wage, but you'll love it more. I've got a couple of pieces that I've bought from Rachel Mills. Fantastic little brand based in Eden Terrace, and I live in Kingsland, so that's 5 minutes from my home. And I've been there before many times, and when I bought the pieces, they had tags on them that said the name of the woman that made them.
Nice.
So nice. And so I love them, and I spent a lot of money on them, and I feel good that I did. It feels worth it. Same if you've ever bought something from a small designer, or that you've been given something that's been made for you by a family member, you just treasure them more. It holds connection to things and people and an idea that you care about. And its story you can follow back. It's not lost to shameful supply chains. And then obviously if it's locally made, the climate impact will be less. So local manufacturers for sort of common clothes, I found that Sly Guild makes t-shirts, which I feel like is an important thing to know, because it's hard to find a good white t-shirt secondhand. A white t-shirt is a good investment to get new because it's not trend bound and you're going to use it for a long time. If it's white, you can over dye it when it gets stained, and cotton is the best fiber when it comes to recycling and also composting. If you want to recycle it, I'll mention it again later, but Little Yellow Bird is a local brand. They recycle things offshore, but cotton they can fully, full circle recycle it. The only jeans I could reliably find made in New Zealand is a very small brand, Anna Roderick. Funny name. I think it's a young brand. They're very expensive, but the ethos is just amazing. And they'll be, utilizing small local factories. The denim isn't processed, because something that I mentioned in the session before was how harmful jeans are because of all of the chemicals and water that gets used in it. So the less processed that your jeans are, the better that they are for the environment. Underwear is a hard one. My options. So I mentioned Rachel Mills. They make women's wear and they also make underwear. They're fantastic. And also NISA, you guys will probably know, Wellington-based underwear manufacturer that employs refugee women. So at this stage, I only get my underwear from those two. They cost anywhere from like $30 to $60 each, so it's a lot. But if you're taking care of your things and trying to cold wash or hand wash, they'll last you years, and they're really hardy, especially Rachel Mills ones. They don't have any spandex; they're 100% cotton, and then that means that you can cut off the elastic and compost them. Yeah. So other big names for like local manufacturing. So for knitwear, obviously Standard Issue, and then also Untouched World, which is South Island based. Yeah, very cool. They both use natural fibers, local merino, and their knitwear is zero waste. For general women's wear, 27 names, Penny Sage and Mina. At least all of their cut and sew is made in New Zealand. And then Cactus Outdoors for outdoor wear. They were actually on Seven Sharp the other day. Really cool. They acquired one of the major local clothing factories. And then if I'm trying to find something in particular, I can't find it myself, I go look at Ethically Kate's blog. It's really good.
Okay.
Yeah, she features a lot of local manufacturing. Another great option is local markets. A great way to connect with local traders and choose options which keeps the money in your neighborhood. You also get to learn, personally and directly from them about how the thing was made, what they made it with, and what their ethos is. So when you purchase this thing, you can connect fully with its history. Something else to consider, especially if you can't find things out there that work for you, is hand making. With a cheap domestic sewing machine, you can make most everything that you would ever need. The best way to learn on a budget is, and the way that I learn for the most part, is by upcycling with stuff that you have at home or like cheap op shop stuff. Clothes, they often have fabric, but also I like bed sheets. Bed sheets are really good for learning. Resource centers sell like a lot of like awesome textiles, and like some of them will be really big. I volunteer at the West Auckland Resource Centre, so I'm biased towards that one. There's also a North Shore Resource Centre. If you've never seen them, you just have to find out what it's about. They're just so cool. They have everything. Oh yeah,
Dumb shop. Yes.
Oh, the Henderson Tip Shop. Yeah, I learned most of my sewing from Pinterest and YouTube, not my degree. So there are lots of free resources out there for hand making. And then what's good about starting to hand make, and I've had a lot of these conversations, is you get to learn personally how much waste you make when you make clothes and how long it takes you. And so it's a really awesome insight into why it costs so much to buy a garment, and it makes you feel a lot better for paying those prices. Heaps of options in the resale market at the moment for buying and passing on clothes. So like I said, resource recovery centers, op shops. It's good to familiarize yourself with the ones that are close to you and what they have. If you're wanting to donate clothes to your op shops, I would say go and visit them beforehand to see if they're even taking anything. At the moment, a lot of them aren't. And then talk to them about, do you think that you'll actually be able to sell this thing? Do you think that you will put this on the shelf, and do you think that it will go? And then you have a little bit more choice over making sure that it doesn't get thrown away. The only place that I've recently donated any clothes to is Koha Apparel. I find that they are pretty often taking things because they just give things so much that they are often needing more things. And then anything that you ever donate or anything you ever give away, repair it. Just try to repair it. Try to repair it yourself, even if you do a fairly shoddy job, because it's just less likely to go into the bin wherever it goes next. Clean. Imagine. I think it was one of two places.
Sorry.
Oh.
Nikki's.
Oh, yeah. So right, Recreation Studios. Too right, Nikki. The clothing bins are owned by Save Mart, which is a for-profit op shop. And my best understanding is that anything cotton, sort of mechanic rag appropriate goes to a for-profit business who's selling mechanic rags. And anything that's not appropriate for that gets sent to like Africa.
Our clothing.
Yeah, you'll notice there's not that many anymore.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
good,
that's
because
right.
they're a terrible option.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always want to be like that.
Hmm. It's gone?
Can I tell you something to write down for you to
Yeah.
Google afterwards? It's Kantamanto Markets.
How do I spell that?
Kantamanto
Yeah. A-M-A-N. T-O.
Markets.
Market.
This was the one where it's the concept is we send bales and bales and bales. This is all of West sends bales and bales and bales of clothes to developing countries, and they have a marketplace. And so traders would buy a bale and sell some things in the marketplace, and anything they don't want to sell because a lot of it's shoddy condition, that's why it's being sent out of our country, gets like dumped in like a nearby
Giant.
natural space. Yeah. So similar. Did you see
I thought that they would take
that's why like clothing bins is anything that's not good enough. Because anything that's good enough just goes to an op shop and they'll sell it.
But
They'll-
they trade this like, oh, okay, this t-shirt is good. And
Yeah. They definitely will with like it'd go into a Save Mart store.
Right.
But there's just too much. There's just too much. So just a lot of
yeah, this is the thing. Who does that? Who does this work? You know, like how many people?
completely.
Yeah, my experience still maybe was quite challenging because of the shops said. Yeah, some boutiques they you need to have this kind of vendors and just like 75. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting tracking accepting of donations because it's changed so much in the past 2 years.
Yes, it has.
Markedly changed.
Yes, it's incredible.
You never saw people having a break
Yeah.
from donations. Ever.
Yeah.
And now it's all the time like teddies, all the
Yeah.
time, cigarette heaps, lots of the op shops. Just like,
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's
Oh,
vanity, we're like,
Nikki wants to share something.
Mhm.
Cool. I will just unmute you. Yeah.
Just when you're finished, Ella. Are you finished yet?
Oh yeah.
I will need to. What I'll do is I'll blast through what I've got left.
That'd be
Yeah.
awesome.
You're done.
Yeah. Right. Then I was going on to Facebook. So to be honest, Facebook is my like primary way of giving away things. It's my favorite. I enjoy it so much. I almost never donate things to op shops anymore. So joining local Facebook groups, sort of regional Facebook groups, pre-cycle groups, pay it forward groups. That way, what you're doing is when you list your things on those groups, you're directly reaching the people who need things because they're in the groups because it's a place that they can receive resources. And when you're doing that, you're going and you're physically meeting these people and understanding their needs, and you receive the personal benefit of the fact that you've passed these things on to someone who truly values them. And it's just a much more personable and effective way. Whereas, donating to an op shop, it could just go into the bin, and this way you know that it's reaching the people who will really appreciate them. And, I've developed a lot of friends that way. So I think that's really wonderful. Facebook gets too much. Facebook is, bad for a lot of reasons, but it's got a lot of good things in terms of amplifying people's voices.
Yeah.
And then Facebook's also really good when you need something that either you don't want to have to buy new, it's a bit random, you think someone will be getting it, or you need to you need something that you don't think you're going to use again. You know, can you borrow it from someone in your neighborhood?
Yeah.
Can you, lots of people are more generous than you think, and then that way you get to meet some people, you know, on your street. Repairing, so there is a increasingly popular service known as repair cafes. They're free community events that are held on a somewhat regular basis, where volunteer repairers come together and they can fix things for the community. And then the aim is that you sit down with them and you pick up some skills from them, so that next time you may be able to repair the thing on your own. So I actually volunteer with Repair Cafe Aotearoa in New Zealand. So they've got social media, website, where you can find out what's happening near you. Like I mentioned, Little Yellow Bird will take specifically cotton textiles for closed loop recycling. Otherwise, apparel, you'll increasingly be able to pass on your textiles there to be downcycled if they're really at the end of their life. Try to follow upcycling groups or craft groups to see if they might be interested in the things that you have, or learn to upcycle yourself. You know, pick up a craft. It's good for mental well-being. And then 100% natural fibers, you can compost them. It's just good to cut out the other components like the labels and the trims and stuff like that. I don't compost myself because I'm lazy, and so I use an app called Share Waste, and then I go take my little bucket of compost to Livia down the road, and I get to see her, and it's all really lovely. And then I put my compost in her bin.
Yeah.
So that app has increased my quality of life tenfold. Generally, keeping up to date with fashion activists and fashion organizations, and promoting what they do is a great way to make your little voice part of a greater voice, and contributing to particularly legislation change if we're thinking about large scale improvements. So mindful fashion is really awesome, trying to improve the local industry, and then Fashion Revolution New Zealand, advocating for transparency and, you know, better ethics. Once you start following them, there's a whole rabbit hole. And then lastly, like a really something that's been really good for me is following like local volunteering groups, ecological groups, community centers especially, because there are so many resources, local events like free events, workshops, seminars for learning and like seeking resources and services that are available near you, to help you with all of the various waste streams that we have in our life. So that's really good for that connection, because it can be hard to find the things that you have access to. I'll skip my last little ramble.